Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another Feminist Around the World. And yes, it is still Women's History Month, I believe. No, it's gone.
No,
it's over. Oh my God, what is April now? I forgot what this is.
Sorry.
I'm completely lost. What is April? Is April anything special?
April's all kinds of things. Every month can be Women's History Month, Samantha.
Well, for us it is, obviously. Yes. It will always be, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Man, so I'm going to keep going. Yeah, definitely. We're just going to say for Sminty, it's women's history all the time, anytime. Or even just the non-binary people, intersectional feminist history year. Life? Lifetime? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to even do this. This is how well I'm doing today. But if you haven't noticed, we are going through a series where we are talking about trans activists, and we do this purposefully, if you can't tell, because we think it is really important that we continue to highlight those who are making history in a community that is trying to be decimated by what seems like our government and many governments around the world. And for us, that does not sit well. So therefore, we're going to celebrate those who are actively out there and working to fight against this type of oppression, which, yes, does affect all of us. So today we are talking about UK trans activist Nim Ralph. Ralph has been an intersectional activist who has been behind the scenes creating platforms and curriculums to teach others how to become activists as well. Ralph is, quote, and this is from their site, a community organizer and freelance trainer and a writer with 15 years work in a number of sectors delivering equity, inclusion, and justice work. And though their work has branched out since they started, Ralph started as a climate movement activist. And in an interview for the Pride series that Ben & Jerry's did. So yes, it's really fun that I can say that. I need some Ben & Jerry's in my life. They said, quote, I got into the activism through the climate movement, but I was always a queer, disabled, brown feminist in that space and spent years working within the movement to address its issues with racism, ableism, classism, colonialism, and patriarchy, while also trying to protect the planet from the worst forms of resource extraction and exploitation. I think there are real parallels in the way that humans extract from the planet and create borders and control to police populations in service of profit, and the way that humans extract what they need from the bodies of people and create borders between our bodies and control us in the service of profit, which I thought was really poignant. And they went on to say, so I got into activism through wanting to prevent the destruction of our natural world in pursuit of profit, and always knew that liberating our bodies was intrinsically bound up in that fight.
And their focus has continued in their activism, looking to teach, to lead, and mentor others down the same path. Ralph has worked for years on ways to organize. They have worked, quote, internationally with grassroots activist groups, campaign organizations, and NGOs to train, facilitate, and support organizational strategy and campaign strategy through the lens of anti-oppression. And on top of that, they have continued to focus on teaching and training others to work behind the scenes. They told gaytimes.co.uk, I spend most of my time coordinating strategic action within the movement as an activist and training and facilitating others on campaign strategy, movement building, and anti-oppression. So strategy is incredibly important to the work that I do. It's one of the central tenets of my approach to change because it keeps us focused, accountable, and effective. I think of strategy like having a map. I know what the environment I'm in looks like. I know where I am and I know where I want to get to. With this in hand, I'm always going to be better equipped to know how to pivot when I hit inevitable issues in my journey.
Yeah. And they continued, we are really in a moment of needing to ask those questions right now while trans activists are being attacked in a context of a global pandemic and uprisings for Black lives. We have to ask critical questions like, how do we ensure the world is paying attention to our plight when governments are slipping through anti-trans policies under the radar? But we also have to be paying attention to how the establishment is trying to mobilize white LGBTQ plus people and their allies to distract from the fight of Black lives and the thousands of people dying each day from coronavirus because of a hard-right government policies which value profit over people, with Black and POC people disproportionately dying. Having the map helps us recognize that our struggles are being intentionally pitted against each other as a way to break solidarity and shared action. It forces the trans community to reckon with the fact that privilege and power, even within our marginalization, and that Black trans voices, as well as other POC, disabled, and chronically ill and poor trans voices, should be front and center in our journey to liberation. And yeah, this obviously was an interview during the coronavirus, and they've definitely worked a lot in centering what is most needed. Because again, we talk about the intersectionality of it all, and that those who are the most marginalized, though they are the first to be hit, it's only a preview to come for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. And with trans rights being attacked all over the world, Ralph has been outspoken about the need for solidarity and true allyship. In that Ben & Jerry's article, they talked about the biggest challenges in the UK when it comes to the trans community. Quote, "The greatest challenge is that part of the feminist movement in the UK and globally right now is pitting our lives against the lives of non-trans women and stirring up a hostile environment for trans people to live. It's no coincidence that since they've been mobilizing against trans rights in the UK in the last few years that anti-trans hate crimes have gone up by 81%. It hurts especially hard because it comes from within the movement that trans people have been fighting for decades. Our fights are the same, and yet a small but vocal section of the movement is gaining a lot of ground and chasing us out, not just of feminist politics, but of public space. This has two terrifying effects. A, it bolsters the rise of the far right and an authoritarian approach to bodily autonomy that we are seeing all around the world at the moment. And B, it leads to horrific levels of violence and hate crimes directed at trans people. It literally kills people, especially trans women of color and sex workers."
Right. And Ralph continued to speak out about the current dangers of TERFs and their TERFs agenda. In the interview with the Gay Times, they said, "Though they're few, they are powerful. They're otherwise progressive, but they fixated on trans people in a way that engages and bolsters a far-right narrative and agenda. Some of them are consciously moving in that direction." And Ralph went on to say, "The tragedy is that I really believe that many of them are so intensely and singularly focused on the legitimate fear of sexual violence that they genuinely haven't realized who their narratives are serving, and they can't see the harm they are recreating. Sexual violence is a real threat, but they've got so narrow in their understanding of that threat that they're now weaponizing their fear against us. When you are a 51% of the global population and you're trying to limit access to life-saving essential services of 1% of the population, you're no longer protecting safe space. You're acting in service of the oppressor. And given that 40% of all LGBTQ plus homicides in the US are committed against trans women of color, not just patriarchy, but white supremacy too. We must take heed from anti-trans feminists. Trauma begets trauma. Let this be a lesson to all of us to find joy in our activism and not let our fear consume us. Let's resist simple narratives about those who seek to harm us. They aren't a homogenous group. A politics of scarcity and fear is no place to incubate our liberation."
And as they continue to speak out about the rights for the trans community and how others can help, they said, "I think more allies being brave enough to speak up and speak out and show that these anti-trans voices are small and not relevant will really help. One of the most significant ways to do this is next time you have a conversation with someone who says something like, 'But if trans people get their rights, what about the safety of women?' Instead of thinking the best thing you can say as an ally is, 'That's transphobic and trans lives aren't up for debate,' recognize that the person's fear is okay. They just need help finding a more accurate answer to the problem. Trans people aren't punching lesbians on buses in the middle of London, and we are just as scared of toilets as you, if not more. So help people to find different answers. Change will come about when our allies get better at engaging people in challenging conversations to realize that we are fighting for the same rights and against shared problems like patriarchy, borders, domestic violence, ableism, racism, and control of our bodies. We need more visible support, and we need it now."
And with all of the advocacy and work, they obviously rarely slow down. So when asked by galdim.com if they have a self-care or collective care process, they said, "It's a work in progress. I think about self-care in the sense of Audre Lorde, who said, 'Caring for myself is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare.'" I Love that quote. Recognizes that even though I'm not a Black woman, I can still relate to this. There's such a high rate of suicide in the trans community, but really it's murder in a system that wants us dead. Self-care in that sense is being alive. My work is a form of self-care. It's about educating to dismantle, because in dismantling, people's lives are saved. On a more individual level, I try to spend time in nature as much as I can. As a trans person of color, I can't imagine not living in a city like London because it's just isn't safe. But I also recognize that being in nature really nourishes me. Earlier this year, I posted a picture on Instagram of me topless, and a lot of people don't know me as trans, so that felt terrifying to me. As soon as I did it, I felt freed. Audre Lorde spoke about this, speaking our truth because our silence isn't going to save us. That is self-care. And I really thought that was important that we shared what they said and how they felt about that. And I love that quote from Audre Lorde, by the way. I think I tried to remember it for one of the episodes we did with Bridget, and I couldn't get it there. I was like, wait. But yeah, so Nim Ralph has been and is an activist in the UK that has been speaking all over the country, all over the world, continuing to share their experiences, continuing to work with nonprofits and organizations to help with strategies and best ways to come and become advocates and work in a very uncomfortable and harsh atmosphere. But yeah, they are doing some amazing things, and we wanted to recognize their work.
Yes, yes. And some very great quotes in this one for sure. Well, as always, listeners, if there's someone you think we should highlight in these segments, please let us know. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a book. You can go pre-order it. Go do that. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you all.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.